Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Last week, I did a video about what the red button is for Myles Garrett and Myles Garrett's camp to end this thing and get what he wants out of this, which is a trade out of Cleveland to a contending team. Basically, a video examining how Myles Garrett can artificially manufacture leverage and if there's any leverage there for him to manufacture. And now let's look at this from the Cleveland Browns perspective, right? How can the Browns get what they want out this situation, which is ultimately Myles Garrett under an extension? So what is the Browns' red button to get that? Because they cannot get an extension out of Myles Garrett unless Myles Garrett wants to sign an extension, and the only way they're going to make that happen is if they do something, right? They can keep him here under control for the next 4 years if they want to, with franchise tags and the remainder of his contract. He can decide if he wants to play out those years on his contract or not. I think somebody in the comment section put it out there that he could go and do what Kyrie did, which was say he was going to get surgery and see if the Browns are going to be willing to call that bluff. Like there are things that Myles could do to try to see if the Browns would bite on it. But what can the Browns do to see if Myles Garrett is going to be willing to rescind this trade request in full? First red button, I think, is the obvious one. I've talked about it multiple times. Go out and trade for a quarterback that Myles can immediately believe in. The guys that pop into my mind, one, I don't think he's going to be available anymore, Geno Smith. The other one looks like he could be available, but don't know what the price tag's going to be, Matt Stafford. Those two quarterbacks, you can wild card in Kyler Murray. I do not like the idea of trading for Kyler Murray because I think he would be very expensive and it would be a similar trade to what you just got done with dealing with Deshaun Watson. And I don't think Kyler Murray is the caliber of quarterback to where he's going to put you past some of the best guys or be somebody who could put you in competition with some of the best quarterbacks in the AFC. That being said, maybe because of Myles' relationship with Texas A&M, maybe there's a relationship there with Kyler Murray. The Browns make a move for Kyler Murray. That might be something that keeps Myles in Cleveland. Matt Stafford is somebody who could keep the Myles Garrett in Cleveland, and then maybe Geno Smith. What I do not think will keep Myles Garrett in Cleveland: Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, or Kirk Cousins, right? I don't think those names have not been accounted for in Myles Garrett's camp. So I don't think they moved the needle. Not to say that the Browns can't have good seasons with any of these quarterbacks, but just stating the obvious here, the Browns have the number 2 overall pick. The Browns have an existing relationship with Kirk Cousins, with Kevin Stefanski's history. He and his camp have to be aware that Kirk Cousins is definitely somebody that the Browns could sign to be the quarterback for this year, or somebody who's likely for the Browns to sign to be a quarterback here for the short term. His camp has to be aware that Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward are options for the Browns going forward. In the case of Shedeur and Cam Ward, I find it very unlikely that Myles Garrett has watched the All-22 on both of those guys, or his camp's watching the All-22 on both of those guys, and they've made a determination on whether they think those guys are good. I think Myles is saying to himself he doesn't want to play for an unestablished quarterback, right? And any rookie that you would take in this year's class would be unestablished. There's not like this is one of those classes where there's a really well-established top-level player that we've been talking about being a number 1 overall pick for like 3 years straight, right? That happened with like Trevor Lawrence the year he came out, Caleb Williams. This is not one of those years. So I don't think those moves, right, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Kirk Cousins really do anything for Myles in terms of like where he sits with his trade demand, right? I do think that Matt Stafford moves the needle. I think Geno Smith moves the needle. And I think, getting somebody like Kyler Murray, although I would not advise it because I think it would be far too expensive. Now, why do I think Matt Stafford would move the needle for Myles Garrett? It's very simple. Matt Stafford has won a Super Bowl recently. He is still playing at a high level, the only quarterback in the playoffs to have a great game versus that Philadelphia Eagles defense. And he did that in the snow, which I thought was pretty impressive for a quarterback who is older, yes, but shows no signs of slowing down. It would be pretty easy to sell him on how the fit would be seamless for Matt Stafford to Cleveland and what Kevin does. He could be able to apply that pretty instantly where the success would be. It would be an obvious win now move, and it would be a situation where the Browns put themselves in a position to be competitors, especially if they retain enough of their picks after a trade for Matt Stafford that they could replenish and go after like an Abdul Carter at 2, right? And then super load that defense with pieces, add some running backs in the draft class, and all of a sudden you got a very easy pitch to Myles Garrett. And maybe that's an idea that I'm going to do tomorrow, which is a mock draft that will basically make Myles Garrett have to stay in Cleveland, or a mock offseason that would make Myles Garrett have to stay in Cleveland. But that would be how you could use Matt Stafford to basically rescind the trade request. And I do think if the Browns traded for Matt Stafford pretty close after that, you would hear either in connection to the Matt Stafford trade that, oh yeah, Matt Stafford agreed to come here because he talked to Myles' people who are also in LA. And Myles' people let it be known that Myles will rescind that trade request and sign an extension in Cleveland if he were to accept being traded there. And then all bygones will be bygones. The Browns will go into the season with a real quarterback in an offense who has experience in an offense that's pretty similar to what the Browns do. And the Browns can feel free to add some offensive linemen around it because the money for Matt Stafford wouldn't be that crazy. You don't have to worry about eating a dead cat for Myles Garrett anymore. You would have a lot of flexibility, a lot of room to be adjustable. All of this stuff will be there for the Cleveland Browns to make a move. And if you did make that move, Myles would probably rescind that trade request almost immediately. You have to also factor in that the Browns made a move like this and Myles still was like adamant about requesting a trade. Right now, he looks very reasonable to the national media because if you're from the outside looking in, you look at this Myles Garrett trade request and you're like, well, the Browns don't have a future at quarterback. And Myles wants out. Good for him, right? That's how a lot of people nationally are looking at this. But all of a sudden, if you see the Browns trade for Matt Stafford and the Browns have a quarterback now and Myles still wants out, and that flips the dynamic on how people kind of talk about this whole thing. So right now, Myles, he's not winning the battle inside the state of Ohio right now. Like the whole LeBron thing really turned a lot of people in Ohio against him at the moment, which he could fix if he just rescinds the trade request, comes back, mends some fences, and then he'll be fine right now. Like not too much damage has been done on that front. But as far as nationally, he's still on the right side of the PR battle. But if the Browns trade for Matt Stafford, the longer his holdout continues after a Matt Stafford trade, the more and more ridiculous he looks. And the less likely it is that people are to view him favorably, which is something that he does care about. So all of that considered, the Browns get Matt Stafford. That's the red button they could push that would ultimately end this thing. There are other red buttons the Browns could push that would end this thing. But this would be the cleanest, most resolute, and most harmless way you could probably end it, right? Like it's not going to tie you in long-term. You still got long-term flexibility at the quarterback position. This would be the most ethical that's how you want to put it. Conflict-free way to resolve the Myles Garrett situation is if you were able to luck into a trade like that. The problem with this is, well, I just said it. You would have to luck into a trade like this. I love the idea of getting Matt Stafford. If Matt Stafford were available and the price tag weren't ridiculous, I would do it in a heartbeat. I don't know if that's going to be an option that's going to be available like at all for anybody, because it's not 100% sure that the Rams are just like straight up shopping him. Like it's rumored, it's heavily rumored that the Rams are leaning towards moving him, but they haven't gotten to the point where anything's public yet, or at least any of the parties are speaking publicly about this. There's also a question of if this is something Matt Stafford wants to do, right? Come to Cleveland. If this is an option for us, maybe he is available to trade for, but maybe he's looking to go to New York or some other bigger city, right? Maybe he doesn't want to go and play in somewhere like Cleveland, right? And that's going to be difficult to get him to agree to come here if that's the case, if he gets traded to Cleveland. Maybe he just wants to play football. He doesn't care where he goes. But all of these things are things you have to worry about with the Matt Stafford trade, and why you can't just count on it, right? Like Kirk Cousins is pretty likely for the Cleveland Browns to have him available and to have him want to play here. Matt Stafford, it's a lot less likely, but it's a lot better of an outcome. Ultimately, if you're the Cleveland Browns, you cannot leave the future of your relationship with the face of your franchise up to a possibility of if Matt Stafford wants to play here or not, and if you could trade for Matt Stafford. That's too big of a domino to just let sit without anything supporting it, especially anything concrete. So there's a huge problem with relying on that strategy. But if you do luck into it, that would probably be best case scenario for you. Red button number 2. Bunch of money. I mean a bunch of money. Again, this has consequences, which I'll get into later. But money has made people change their perspective before. Now, I don't know where Myles Garrett is on this. And it is true with how much players make these days. A big old bucket of money just doesn't talk the same way that it used to, because, you know, guys are used to being able to pretty much do whatever they want, have enough money to do the things that they want with what they have right now, right? It's not like Myles Garrett is going to be facing like poverty if he doesn't take a big contract from the Cleveland Browns. Myles Garrett's going to be fine financially for the rest of his life, whether he takes a giant contract from the Browns or whether he takes a bunch of contracts from a bunch of other teams. So it's not going to change Myles's life dramatically in the way that like signing his first NFL contract changed his life. From what I understand, I don't believe he has like a situation at home where he even feels the burden to provide for his entire family like some players do. So I don't know how much of a motivator money would be for Myles Garrett. But if money is something that could influence Myles, and maybe Myles is somebody who sees himself as being able to buy into an ownership group later in his career, and maybe he needs to make a bunch of money for that, right? So maybe that's an influencing factor for Myles Garrett. Maybe Myles is really interested in financial security. If you're the Browns, that is an opportunity there for you to drop a giant contract on the lap of Myles Garrett. Now, Myles did this team a solid during his first contract negotiation. As much as vitriol is out there about Myles Garrett, and as much as fans are annoyed about Myles Garrett right now, rightfully so, Myles did sign a deal that was intentionally under market in 2020 for his extension that helped the Browns add players to this roster year in, year out, and also deal with the Deshaun Watson contract over time, right? Like that was very helpful. Myles Garrett took a undervalue contract offer, which kind of points to money's not a real motivating factor for him. So I don't know how successful this strategy would be, but the Browns could always drop a bag of money in front of Myles Garrett and see what happens, right? Offer him not just the richest deal for a non-quarterback, which I think Myles is interested in resetting the market. I think he has to reset the market because he's Myles Garrett. If he does not reset the market, it has a negative effect on everybody else, on all of his other peers. I don't feel like he has the intention of doing that. So you would not only have to give him the highest APY for a non-quarterback in NFL history, but you'd probably have to give him a lot of that guaranteed and the highest guarantees for a non-quarterback in NFL history. Now, a contract like that is certainly unprecedented. Will it be as costly as the Deshaun Watson deal? No, because Myles Garrett will be good enough to where you won't think about having to get rid of him before that contract, or at least that is what the hope is. And remember, the problem with the guaranteed contract isn't that the guaranteed contract in itself inherently is a horrible idea. The issue with the guaranteed contract is when you give a guaranteed contract to a player that you don't really have in your future plans anymore. Assuming that Myles Garrett continues his Hall of Fame trajectory over the next 5 to 6 years of his career, it's not really going to matter whether his money's guaranteed or not, because that doesn't really change how it's accounted for on the cap. The rules aren't more strict for guaranteed money than they are for non-guaranteed money. You can still move the money around and manipulate it whichever way that you want. What the guaranteed money does mean is that if you need to move away from this player, i.e. trade or cut that player, it would be much more difficult to do because the guaranteed monies would have to be paid out for and accounted for on the salary cap the day you make that trade or you cut him. Given that the Browns' goal here is to have Myles Garrett retire in Cleveland, giving him an absurd amount of guaranteed money would actually track with something that they would be likely to do, because there's no downside for them if they think that Myles Garrett is somebody who's going to continue this track of level of play, but also somebody who they don't want to move. They don't ever want to be in this situation again. And if he's signed to a bunch of guaranteed money for the rest of his career, he's not going to be in this situation because you can't really trade him once he's under that much guaranteed money. A lot of misinformation about guaranteed contracts, and a lot of people have gone out their way to make it seem like the guaranteed money part is the problem of the Deshaun Watson contract, and it is part of the problem. But the reason that the guaranteed contract for Deshaun is a disaster is because Deshaun Watson is not playing at a level to where you would want him to be on your roster going forward. If Deshaun were playing at a level where he could still be the starting quarterback without that being something that the Browns felt like was limiting them or hurting them actively, then they would be fine with paying him whatever that contract is, because it wouldn't be that expensive in the long haul of things. But the issue with Deshaun's contract is that you don't want him to play quarterback for the Cleveland Browns anymore. If you have a guaranteed contract to a player that you are pretty sure they're going to play out that contract without you wanting to cut them, then you're going to end up being fine. So that's why the Browns would have no hesitation here in offering Myles a massive guaranteed contract. If you're concerned about a guaranteed contract is that it offers too much financial security to Myles Garrett, which means that he won't be incentivized to play well. Look, I just think that that's a silly way to go about it. Myles Garrett has a bunch of financial security already. If Myles Garrett was not internally motivated outside of the financial benefits of playing well, to be one of the best players in football, then he would have never gotten to where he was or has gotten to right now. So I'm not one of these people who believe that, once you give them all that money, they're not going to want to play anymore. I think most athletes, especially the ones who hit a special Hall of Fame level like Myles Garrett, want to be great players, and their ambition to be great players doesn't change simply because they got paid. I don't deny that that certainly happens with some players, right? We have history of that happening where a player gets a big payday, but it usually doesn't matter whether that money's guaranteed or not. Like, if a player is somebody who's going to do that, the new flow of money would have done that regardless of if it's guaranteed or not. So I think there's really no risk here for the Browns to offer him guaranteed money, but that's not the problem with this scenario. The consequences for this are obvious, right? You're going to tie yourself down to a quarterback level contract for a non-quarterback while you're still looking for a quarterback. Never been done before. I'm not saying you can't win like that, right? But it's never been done before. And if Myles is true about his intentions to win a championship, that might be something that Myles Garrett is also aware of and understands. Hey, I'm not going to take a giant contract anywhere I sign, or at least the giant contract people are expecting me to take anywhere I sign, because I don't want to lower my team's chances of winning a championship. Maybe that's all something Myles has already factored in. But Miles is also not getting paid a ton base salary wise. All of his money is cut up in bonuses. So he would get a significant raise if the Browns were able to work out an extension with him this year. Financially, he benefits greatly from working out an extension this year. And if the Browns can make that one of the most lucrative extensions in NFL history, obviously that has its benefits. Downsides is you put yourself in an unprecedented cap situation. Also, it's not guaranteed to work, right? And if you do offer this historic contract and Myles Garrett publicly turns it down, well, now we're dealing with another public embarrassment, right? So, I don't know what the outcome of all of that would be, what the domino effect of all of that would be, but I feel like there would be some kind of domino effect from a player basically saying, no, I don't even want to take historic money to play with you, and saying that publicly. There has to be some kind of other effect there that could be costly to the Cleveland Browns there. But that would be the red button push number 2. I don't think that one's going to work. I'll be honest with you. I don't think the drop the bag of money thing is going to work. And I don't think the Browns wanted to resort to that, but I don't think the give him $50 million a year, see what he says, button is going to work. Red button 3, call his bluff. I fear this is the most likely path that we're going down, right? Like maybe a trade for Matt Stafford can stop us from going down this path. But right now, with everything that we know, with no trade incoming or no answer at quarterback obvious yet for the Cleveland Browns, and one will probably manifest itself by the end of next month, but with all of these things up in the air, Myles is on a path to sit out as much of the offseason as he's going to sit out, maybe even parts of the regular season. The Browns are on a path to call his bluff on that. This is the collision point of where these two, the team and Myles Garrett, the path that they're on, this is the natural collision point we're going to be at, which is at some point in August, somebody's going to have to make a decision. Are we going to keep Myles Garrett on this team, even if he tells us he ain't going to play? Am I going to decide to sit out for a whole year in order to force a trade? This is the path we are on. Hey, like, at what point do these two trains collide? Is something going to happen? Is somebody going to intervene to make sure it doesn't? But that is the path that we're on right now. Myles is incentivized. If he really wants to get to a competitor, the only way he's going to make that happen sooner rather than later is to not play ball, is to sit out an entire season if he has to. The Browns are not incentivized remotely to trade him this offseason. Maybe after June, but still not very heavily incentivized to trade him this offseason. They're not very heavily incentivized to trade him, period, because the return packages for Myles Garrett are stinky right now. I've heard these return packages. People are like, you should be lucky to get a first from Myles. That's insane. Myles Garrett's at least worth at least 2 first-round picks. And right now, people telling me that you can't expect 2 first-round picks from Myles Garrett. It ain't worth doing. It ain't worth doing. The Browns are on the collision course to call that bluff because the impact of trading him would be worse for the Browns from a salary cap perspective, at least, and from an ability to improve the team in the offseason perspective. The trading him this offseason would put more damage to that than simply having him on the roster and him not playing. Like if Myles took a sabbatical, that would be less impactful to the Cleveland Browns than actually trading for him. Or trading him, my bad, not trading for him, trading him. So the Browns have no incentive to do anything other than call Myles' bluff if they can't make a move that's going to move Myles, right? If the contract extension talks don't move Myles Garrett, if money is something he's not interested, if An improvement at the quarterback position is not something that interests Myles Garrett, then all of a sudden you're at this point. The question is, how far does Myles want to take it? Like, will we get a sudden acknowledgement that, oh man, whatever quarterback that the Browns have here that isn't like a top tier guy, but maybe better than what they had last year, all of a sudden makes me feel like the Browns could win. All of a sudden I want to rescind my trade request, but we're doing it in like late July. I don't know. But that is the collision course that we're on. I don't know what the result of that is going to be. I don't know if these two trains are going to collide. I'm just telling you right now, these two trains are on the same track, and if nobody does anything from now until the start of the season, they're going to collide, and it's going to be nasty. But y'all let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What other resolutions to this do you see possibly happening, right, that don't include the Browns trading him for less than he's worth, or Myles Garrett magically just like deciding he doesn't want to be traded anymore? Like, what real solutions do you see? What do you think could sway Myles from wanting a trade out of Cleveland? What do you think Cleveland could do to make Myles more likely to sign an extension? How does Cleveland get what they want out of this situation? Yes, they have all the leverage in the world to keep Myles Garrett on the team in the short term, but Myles Garrett is going to play wherever Myles Garrett wants to play in the long term. So how do you make where he wants to play Cleveland in the long term? If the goal isn't just to keep him for a year, it's to keep him for the rest of his career. It's a lot to think about. Y'all let me know in the comment section down below. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.